What's up and welcome to the Game of Thrones Companion Podcast presented by The Disorderly. Head over to thedisorderly.com for the best in sports and entertainment. My name is Nick Rizner. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Rizner, NickRizner. And this is it, man. The time is now. Game of Thrones has returned. It's been, 2 years? A little bit less than 2 years, and it feels like it's been 10. Honestly, we've been doing a lot of these companion podcasts. We did True Detective. We did Westworld, which in its own right is a very complicated show. A lot going on. Sharp Objects, Succession, a bunch of shows, right? But Game of Thrones, just because of the source material, you have this whole series of books, you have a very complicated story in general, tons of characters. I mean, that's evident by, we're watching an episode right now in season 8 of the entire series, and we're seeing characters meet for the first time since season 1, and some meeting for the first time, period. You know, take Dany and Sansa, for example. So, obviously, a super complicated show. That makes these companions fairly complicated as well. Fortunately, for me at least, that first episode was fairly straightforward. Not too much to really get into as far as bringing in things from the past. There were certain Easter eggs, obviously, and things like that, and hints as to, how this season's going to go, the plot of the season, things like that. But for the most part, this is pretty straightforward. So, let's just get into it. Let's start with talking about the new intro, right? We were treated to an updated map. It's a lot more detailed than previous maps, so let's sort of go through it. First, we're taken through the newly destroyed wall. You can see where, that ice dragon blew a hole in the wall with the blue fire, which I think they say is so cold it's hot, so think like dry ice, basically. But you see the wall, you see the ground turning to ice as we sort of advance south, obviously symbolizing the advance of the Night King and the spread of winter. Then we arrive at the last hearth and get a much more detailed look at the ins and outs of Winterfell. Finally, we move to King's Landing and see a detailed look at that area as well. Now, I'm wondering if this map will change from episode to episode, and the reason that I really think it will is, just given the importance of the last hearth in this season premiere. Right. Of course, the episode ends with Tormund and the remaining crew from the Night's Watch arriving at the last hearth to find that the Night King had already been there. He decimated the place. That's where he left that creepy zombie boy nailed to the wall in the famous Night King spiral design as a warning. Of course, that design is a recurring theme as well, going all the way back to season 1 when the Night King left all those mutilated horses in the same spiral design. Leading me to believe there's probably some deeper meaning to that symbol. Think the maze from Westworld. It's a symbol, but there's more to it than that. It has a meaning. So I'm assuming that this sort of spiral also has something to do with maybe the Night King's motives or some sort of allusion to where he came from. I don't know. But basically, you discover the Night King's army is between those who are defending the wall and everyone else in Winterfell. But the fact that they spotlighted those 3 locations, and one of them is clearly less famous than the other 2, right? You have Winterfell and King's Landing, which are pretty much staples in the show. I'd argue those are the 2 most famous locations throughout the entire plot of the show. And then for some reason, the only other location you see is the last hearth. Of course, that's where the scenes takes place. So I'm assuming that they'll get into, whatever scene the plot is. But it's interesting, too, because that comes before the episode starts, right? So you're seeing this last hearth, which really has no relevance to anybody. I mean, I'm sure if you read the books, which, full disclosure, I haven't, I've heard things here and there, but I'm sure if you read the books, they probably bring that up before just now. But in context of the show, did they ever bring up that location before? I don't think so. So, the map is almost a hint of what's going to happen in the episode to come. I don't know if I like that, because now I'm looking for it. So for episode 2, if they show some location, I'm like, all right, got to keep that location in my mind because something's coming. But we'll see how they sort of play with that. But anyway, the actual show, opens with a sort of clever nod to the series premiere, right? It shows a little boy running through the crowd and climbing up a tree to get a better look at Jon Snow and Dany marching in with, the army of the Unsullied and all that. And this is sort of a combination of Arya pushing through the crowd in episode 1, as well as Bran running around and climbing everything in episode 1. But to me, it's just more of a reminder of how innocent these kids are in all of this. Right? All this craziness is going on, but kids are still kids. And seeing the comparison of these kids running through, trying to look at Jon and Dany, basically with just, childlike wonder, it really brings it home how much Arya and Bran and everybody, but specifically them because they're so young, how much they've gone through since the first episode and how fast life has really hit them. It's so much terrible things that's happened to pretty much every character in the show. And if you go back to episode 1, there's innocent little kids wanting to get an eye of the parade basically coming through town. So I've actually found that pretty sad, to be honest. Just seeing that sort of direct comparison. I don't know if that was the intent of it, but that's what it did for me. And it's also, on another level, it's just wild seeing the scale of that army, right? Like, I almost get the childhood wonder because you see how big they are. I mean, you hear the numbers, like how many Unsullied they have. What is it, like 5,000 Unsullied, and now 2 dragons, used to be 3. And, however many people in the Dothraki horde. Like you have all these numbers that get thrown at you, but to see it visually and see all the people in formation, it is kind of awe-inspiring. It's also, to Sansa's point in this episode of asking how do they plan on feeding an army that size with 2 dragons. Good point there. I don't know. How do you do that as winter rolls in? We already know the dragons are barely eating. It seems like a problem, right? And that might be something the show never addresses again. It's interesting that Sansa brought it up, so maybe they're foreshadowing some issues with that particular thing, starvation or the troops being weak or something. Who knows? But even if they don't bring it up again, it is kind of an interesting point just to raise in general. How do you feed an army like that? They keep talking about how they're the world's biggest army. There's problems associated with that, including dissension, by the way, which we're already seeing sort of hints of that as well, but I won't get too far into that. Back to the sort of welcome parade. Arya goes through this whole slew of reintroductions of people really, really fast. Because if you remember, she really hasn't seen anyone except Sansa in quite a long time. So you've got her seeing Jon Snow for the first time, and then her seeing the Hound, who she thought was dead, right? She left him for dead. And then Gendry, who she also maybe thought was dead. I honestly can't remember. I was trying to figure that out. I know they haven't been in the same location since the Brothers Without Borders sold him to Lady Melisandre. But I don't know if she knows that he escaped or that he's alive. There might be an answer to that question too, but from the top of my head, I don't know. But these are all pretty major figureheads in Arya's life/journey, and she just saw them in rapid succession. I can't imagine what the emotions are, right? And you see it. She actually acts it out pretty well. With no words, just seeing reaction shots. I thought she did a pretty good job acting it out. But I see a lot of people criticizing this episode for being boring or all set up. I think people thought they were going to come out with guns blazing. Only 6 episodes in the season, and I actually disagree. I think it moved pretty fast considering how much they accomplished. We already established a new central conflict. For example, you have Daenerys Targaryen versus the Northerners, right? And I'll tell you what, they did a pretty good job of swiftly turning the audience against Dany, which is all the more impressive considering how beloved she is in the Game of Thrones universe. But if you want to turn audience against a character, having her butt heads with the now beloved Sansa Stark, the always beloved Samwell Tarly, that's a pretty effective way of doing that. And you can also couple that with the run of people who are warning Jon Snow not to be basically tricked by his love for Dany. It's basically, in not so many words, a lot of people have said, you might be blinded by how much you're into this chick. That's what they're saying almost. You hear from Arya, you hear from Sansa, you hear from Sam. They all tell him to remember who he is and why he's doing this. Dany's starting to kind of look like a real asshole, to be honest. Not to mention a power-hungry conqueror, which is something that, if you actually look back at what she did, yes, she freed the slaves, and she did some good things, and she was trying to, do the right thing and be a fair leader and all this. She also did just conquer a bunch of places, and it was all on this hell-bent mission to reclaim the throne. As Jon was leading this holy mission to save life, and I'm gonna fight for the living and take down this army of the undead, whatever. While he was doing that and really had a noble cause, Dany really was just looking out for basically herself and trying to rule the 7 kingdoms. That was her motive. So when they talk about her as this power-hungry conqueror who, maybe isn't this perfect queen that Jon thinks that she is, I agree. It might just be that exact situation. So let's just get into a few more things bouncing around the episode. The absentee Lannister army. We first hear Tyrion explain that the Lannister army is on their way north to join the cause. This, of course, is a reference back to the last season when Tyrion struck up a deal with Cersei to come fight the undead in the north. But we also know that Cersei has no intention of actually doing this. We see that Tyrion probably doesn't really buy it either when he's delivering the message in that big meeting in the beginning. It's pretty telling. He's not even really making eye contact with people. He knows how ridiculous it sounds. He knows how unlikely it is. You can really read that in his face. And then at the end of the episode, we see Jaime arrive by himself. But that's as far as we get with the Lannister army in Winterfell. Back at King's Landing, we see Euron Greyjoy with the captain, Captain Strickland, and the Golden Company, essentially making up Cersei's army at this point. And she seems pretty delighted that the dead have broken through the wall, which makes sense, right? It lines up with her plans to have the Northerners and the dead kill each other off while she maintains the throne and rules over the ashes or whoever's left, or eliminates whatever straggling enemies still remain, and basically assures that she rules the throne. That's her plan anyway. And the other thing with Cersei, she also fucks Euron, which seems odd at first until you realize that she's probably covering for Jaime's baby, right? She did the same thing with Robert Baratheon and her first 3 kids. She was married. She was having sex with Robert Baratheon to basically be able to legitimately say, all these kids are Robert Baratheon, so they're the heir to the throne. They're not, incest babies, which would make them illegitimate, right? So she's pregnant with Jaime's baby, as far as we know. There's no proof. I never saw an ultrasound, but she claims to be pregnant. Obviously, she's pregnant. It's with Jaime's baby. So by having sex with Euron, she can now be like, oh, yep, you did the trick. Euron, one and done. I'm pregnant with your baby. And that's basically plausible deniability from her end with this future child. And finally, Cersei commissions Bronn to kill both Jaime and Tyrion with the famous Lannister crossbow. I was surprised by that. I know her and Jaime had a falling out, but to say, to send a hitman out to kill him is crazy. Now, I don't think Bronn will do it. I think most people don't think Bronn will do it. Obviously, he's money driven. Obviously, he's looking out for himself. But not really. I feel like he's grown into, it's like the Hound, right? Like these are these violent, they'll just follow orders and do whatever. But you see them both kind of grow a heart as the series goes. I'd be very surprised if Bronn kills Jaime or Tyrion. Actually, yeah, both. I don't even know who he's closer with at this point, to be honest. So, I don't know. That is what it is. I'll just leave that there. I don't know what's going to happen with Bronn. And the last little tidbit, as far as Cersei goes, is we also learn that she has other plans for Daenerys, whatever that means, right? Bronn, when he gets commissioned to do this hit basically and kill Jaime and Tyrion, he assumes that he's like, if the queen wants Daenerys dead, he's like, oh no, she's got other plans for the Dragon Queen or whatever. So I don't know what that means. If she doesn't want someone to just go over and kill her, I wonder what her plan for Daenerys is, because she has a crazy plan. I mean, think back to the wedding where I can't remember, Winds of Winter, that episode where they blow up that whole citadel. By the way, it's not a wedding. I always think it is. It's the hearing for Cersei, I believe. But anyway, they blow up that citadel. She's a mastermind of this stuff, and I can't wait to see what she has planned. Even if her plans are foiled and she gets beat, the show is still going to show you a big chunk of whatever her master plan is, and I'm excited to see it, to be honest. In other news, weapon forging. Gendry is using all his blacksmith skills. He's taking all the mined dragon glass and making weapons out of it. From the looks of it, the raw material is somewhat limited. Like the last cart arrives. He's like, is this it? And he's like, aye. So I don't know. It seems like, and he's also saying, be careful. We need every last inch of this. So it seems like they're somewhat limited on dragon glass, but that makes it all the more frustrating, by the way, when the Hound needs to have a giant dragon glass axe custom made. But whatever. To be honest, it'll be badass when he's wielding that thing on the battlefield, so I guess I don't care. But it just seemed like a waste to make him this giant battle axe when they have limited material. Like, you saw them using it for little arrowheads for arrows. That seems like a much better use for it. What do I know? And then Sansa is being set up as basically the smartest person on the show, which is interesting. Now, this is essentially the result of her learning from all the sort of famous evil manipulators from the Game of Thrones series, the people she's interacted with, Cersei, Littlefinger, Ramsay Bolton. And that does make sense that she would have grown into quite the strategist herself, but they're laying it on kind of thick. I feel like they're basically telling you instead of showing you that she's so smart. For example, Arya calls her the smartest person she knows. Sansa calls Tyrion stupid, essentially, which is, he's typically one of the smartest characters. So for her to call him stupid, that's also the dialogue telling you, man, Sansa's smart. I don't know. I don't buy that Cersei's tricking Tyrion for what it's worth. Like, people are like, oh man, Tyrion, how can he be getting tricked? Why does he trust his sister? He never does. He's always a step ahead. I think he'll continue to be, but that's just my guess. Anyway, look for Sansa to have some mastermind manipulation, because it seems like they're setting her up to be that kind of smart person. And finally, I'll wrap things up with some quick hits from around the episode, things that maybe aren't larger points, but will most definitely turn into larger points, because there's no wasted time on Game of Thrones. Theon rescued his sister, Yara, from being held prisoner on the Iron Fleet. She's on her way to take back the Iron Islands, which are currently unoccupied because, of course, Euron's having sex with Cersei, while Theon plans on heading north to help the Starks fight the Army of the Dead, the Night King, all that. Gendry is making a special Dragonstone weapon for Arya upon her request. It looks like a spear that detaches in the middle and has dragon glass on one end. It's kind of hard to tell. It's this really crude drawing. I actually thought it was funny. He's like, can you make this? He didn't have any follow-up questions. It's not exactly a certified shop drawing, so I don't know what's going on. But I'm sure there'll be more of an explanation about that weapon later. They wouldn't have thrown that scene in there if it's not going to have some important role. I guess, at least on one level, she has Needle, which is the sword. Then she has that dagger, which is Valyrian steel. Of course, Valyrian steel can take out White Walkers, and she needs some dragon glass weapon to take out the undead. So I don't know Who knows? But it looks cool. I'm sure it'll be cool. Maybe some sort of bow staff thing with a blade on the end. We'll see. Then Jon Snow learned his true identity. That happened. That was a big reveal. We obviously already knew it, but he learned it. That he's the rightful heir to the throne. That he's the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. The question now is, how is Dany going to receive that? I don't think well. I think that's why they set her up as being potentially villainous in this episode, because it seems like her sole goal was to take over. How is she going to react to the fact that in her same bloodline, she's second in line to be heir to the throne? And Jon, no matter how pure he is, she's going to view him basically as a threat to her claim, right? Sam asked Jon, "You gave up your crown to save your people. Would she do the same?" No, I don't think she would. I don't know, but I don't think she would. And that'll do it. I don't want to talk about this stupid Harry Potter-esque riding the dragons and he's kissing Dany and the dragons are like, "Hey, like, watch it. That's my mom." Like, stupid. I feel like you can hear the laugh track during those scenes, and it was terrible. The one joke for me that really landed was when Tormund and them are sneaking around and they're crawling through, I guess, like the crypts of the last hearth, and all of a sudden they round a corner, and the group that was at the wall, the Night's Watch people, they round a corner and they both scare each other, and then he says, "Watch out, his eyes are blue." And he's like, "My eyes have always been blue." Just a good joke. I like that joke. I'm here for the jokes here and there, but when it's too much, it was corny, and there wasn't that many of them, but specifically that dragon scene, man, I can't get into it. Not to mention the fact that as soon as he got on that dragon, shouldn't she know, like, oh wait, only Targaryens can ride on dragons? So I feel like that's the reveal right there, that Jon Snow is a Targaryen, and clearly she didn't pick up on that. It was just so corny. And then if you don't know he could drive, what if he fell off and died? Like, in her mind, what a risky thing to be like, yeah, get on. What are you, scared? Stupid. I also, it was so goddamn long. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but it was so long, and we only have 6 episodes, and I was like, hurry up. I can't believe we were watching them. Like, it was so, like him when it does like the deep dive, down the cliff, and he's like, whoa, and he's almost falling off, and the whole thing looked like CGI. Like, I hated it so much. Anyway, on that note, we'll wrap up the first episode of the final season of Game of Thrones. We'll be back with you every single week, breaking down the episodes, offering theories probably. I'm not even going to bother right now. I'll give you one hot take. It's not like a theory. It's just my own stuff. I don't think the Night King will be the final battle. I think the Night King battle happens somewhere in the middle of the season. They defeat the Night King, and then the series ends where it's like, all right, now that we don't have this common enemy uniting us, then how do the pieces fall? Who turns on who backstabs, who ends up sitting on the Iron Throne when it's just the humans left. That's how I think it'll end, but we'll see. Anyway, that'll do it. Once again, check us out at disorderly.com, Disorderly Media on Twitter, Disorderly ENT on Facebook, and my name is Nick Rizner. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Rizner, NickRizner. Thanks for joining us. Until next week, peace.